Let's talk a bit about Jankos then. Obviously, we've like briefly touched on him before. Now, obviously, he is the most enduring player of this team because, I mean, and that just shows what a fabulous career he's had, that he's basically never been bad. I always say he's one of the only players I've ever seen. And by the way, the idea he played jungle and was never bad, that is impossible. Like, I've seen League of Legends. I don't know anyone from basically any region, pretty much, who could say that if they were a jungler. So how would you explain this guy? Because as you say, in the early days, it wasn't a meme. When he had that nickname, the First Blood King, it's like it was just magnetic. He just would find his way to get the kill. Even if you could tell, sometimes it clearly wasn't a gank that was set up. Like, he wasn't common that this was coming. He would just go there and a kill would happen. Like, who is this guy to you? Who was he in the early days?
That was hell for me as a coach, because I'm like, at the beginning, I would try to plan some stuff for him. I'm like, okay, so you're a jungler. Please tell me your route. Tell me why you're doing this route. And communicate with this with your team. And after some time, we found out that didn't work, because he would play Lee Sin. He'd go do a lane gank where the opponents have flash up, and I'm like, they have flash up. Why are you there and not at mid where this guy doesn't have flash? It's pointless. And he'd go by and he'd do a double kill, and I'm like, what is going on? So this guy back then was a 100% natural, right? So he wasn't that good at the start of the split, because remember, he wasn't playing a lot because he had the university stuff. So with the potatoes, right? Sure. So he was doing his potato stuff, and he was only playing scrims. He was not playing solo queue basically back then. So against NIP, he actually was not doing that well. We extremely out macroed them back then. Then the start of the season happens, and Jankos comes to the gaming house. He's finally finished his school, and that's the first time in life that Jankos fully started playing League of Legends as a job. And it's just so perfect that this guy's career was able to go the way it went, because there's a lot of players who got unlucky, that they had the most important qualification where they couldn't play a lot and they didn't make the qualifiers and they quit their career, right? Sure. And you never know, like, what if these guys could focus 100% on the game? How good would they be? And Jankos had an ideal career situation because he was still young. He still was a new player. He could still learn a lot under people like Overpow, for example, who had a great mind for the game, or under people like VandeR and Sulliver, who were extremely experienced with League of Legends, right? Because this was the Dota guy. And then you had two guys from League of Legends who were there from the very beginning. And now you have Jankos, a new guy who's mechanically talented. Now he can 100% focus on the game. Of course, he did play Diablo 3 also, as I said before, but he would play League of Legends all the time. And he actually had a coach, when back then, apart from me, there was only Aranea and Veggie, Jensen, who wasn't the coach. He was just playing solo queue, basically. And maybe he did some statistics. Like, when I heard back then, there were people saying that SK had a coach. I'm like, that's not true. We can say he's a coach, but it's not true physically, right? It's not true, right? He's not on scrims with the guys and talking about the macro stuff, right? So I really think Jankos had all of the elements at the same time in the right moment. And he's also a really talented guy, because as I said, back then he was just a natural, and actually he wasn't that smart about the game. The example I gave you with the Elise was a real example. He didn't know what to do. He's like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. He was running around just farming while the opponents were diving. He didn't know what to do. So I had to dumb down the game. Nowadays, this guy has transitioned from a natural to a genius. This guy, every play that Jankos does now is thought out. He knows exactly where to be, and he still has some of the feel left. But Jankos is now like people still. It's not the First Blood King anymore, right? We remember him that way because that's how he was. But this is the best thing. Not only was he back then the mechanical beast, the talented young guy, not a lot of pro players can transition into the experienced role.
Sure.
And this guy did it. He's so mature. How many pro players do you know, like Jankos? Compare this to the NA double lift, Lena stuff. You have a player who will not focus on a relationship, who will not fuck around in scrims, who streams for popularity, but only because that's needed from an organization standpoint and for his own popularity. So that's like the work he puts in for his future. But the moment things go sour, he stops streaming. He cuts it and he focuses on the game. And
sounds like the perfect pro, right?
This is the perfect pro. And actually in Polish podcasts and stuff, I've been saying this for some time. Because we have he's been winning player of the year in Poland for 2 years running because he's the perfect pro. He's a great player. He has no controversy. He focuses on the game, and he has a social media presence, and he's funny. He's everything. Jankos is currently the best Polish esport representative, in my opinion.
Well, that's fair. Yeah. Right. So obviously, I didn't.
He's not fat, like.
That helps. That definitely helps, mate. He's got a full head of hair. He's got everything going for him. Bloody bastard.
Exactly. Boy, he's the Polish wonder boy.
There you go. Now, a player that we've touched on, but we didn't talk about in depth, is VandeR, another guy that was with you, as you said, from way, way back. I mean, if people don't know, he actually used to be an AD carry and he role swapped to support. So it's an interesting angle on that in itself. Who is VandeR to you? Because I think if we use the kind of spectrum you set up earlier, he came from being someone who I assume was a talent in the early days, and most of his career has been being the veteran player, hasn't it? It's been being the guy who's like, I can see why he's sort of shifted into being a team captain now. It kind of makes sense for where he is. And he's also a very interesting guy in as much as, whereas if you talk to a Jankos or some of the more outgoing Polish players, they have that sort of like, very confident, you could say cocky personality. He's always seemed to me a lot more of like a reflective individual. In fact, sometimes maybe that's even played against him. He seems like a guy who sometimes maybe questions himself. Who is VandeR to you? What's his career been like from your side?
So in the ROCCAT day, okay, let's actually start off with the old days. Look, I played with him for a long time in many teams. The first team I played with was the Delta, actually. But the most important team I played with him is this team called LOL. So we actually played in the regionals of season 2. So it was Kick is top, me in the jungle. Mid was Shushay, actually. And
Yes.
bot was VandeR and this guy Grom. So
But you had to play Moscow 5, right?
yeah, actually, like my tournaments were so unlucky. Heck, I had CLG and Moscow 5 in my group.
Sure.
And so I had 1-2 and I didn't come on the group. And in Warsaw, there was a tournament. CLG and Moscow, I do 1-2. And these teams always met up in the finals then, right? So
Yes.
And of course, Moscow 5 in the first round of the regionals, right? So really unlucky shit, you know? And back then, yeah, VandeR was just a good player, as you say, right? He was decent, right? There never was the kind of approach, this guy is a genius. Like when I played with Creaton in the HCL days, I mean, I knew this guy was a genius. Like we'd be playing a professional match. This guy would be just like doing, bunny hops on the opponents, right? Like he'd like take Urgot bot and have like 6-0. Like 6-0 is like a normal game for him. Like nowadays you don't win lane. This guy would just have 6-0, right? So VandeR was not this kind of player. Like you could see that instantly. He was a good player, but he wasn't crazy good as Creator was, right? So as a player, yeah, I have good times with him, right? I've been with him in a couple teams. Now, when I came to ROCCAT, it was the same thing. This guy is just a really good team player. Out of the game, you can talk with him. You can have some funny times with him. You can have some serious times with him. You can discuss the game. As you said, he's not like this kind of hyperactive dude, because Jankos was a little bit of a hyperactive dude. Nowadays, I definitely think he's changed a lot. But VandeR was kind of the quieter guy. But I won't say that he was, a shy guy or anything like that. Maybe he was a little bit more reflective, but this guy is just a really good teammate. And actually, I think VandeR might be the guy that's had the most influence over my whole team movements in my career. I got a question like this like last week or something. Who was the most influential person in my career, right? And actually, I think it's VandeR, because a lot of teams I formed with him, he was the one who, along with Sulliver, came to me and gave me the proposition of becoming a coach. So that's an extremely big, a big change, right?
Sure.
Which would shape the rest of my career. There were no coaches back then. This was a novel idea, right? And even I didn't want to be a coach, as I said before, right? So VandeR, I think when he was in ELO, he played AD carry, and right after that tournament, he switched to support. And basically, I think that's a good decision from him. Like, as we're discussing now, he wasn't the mechanical genius. As a support, he can still have a lot of say in the team. And this is a guy I would definitely want in my teams, right? He's actually doing really good now, right? Like, I think it's, like, as I was talking about with Woolite before in Rogue, I think it was kind of stupid that he wasn't in the main team of Rogue at the beginning,
Yes.
with the Kiki's lineup. I don't see any reason why VandeR shouldn't be there, right? So, VandeR, I just think this guy is a really, right now, experienced, stable guy. And definitely you can work macro around him. Like, just like I had Zazus remember what I told you with the Zazus macro stuff?
Yes.
But VandeR was the guy I went to the first day, right? To discuss about the in-depth stuff, that how swaps are played in Korea and why they're played that way. So Why? Because I knew this was Jankos, he'd be doing his stuff, overpower. Yeah, we discussed the problems there. Seller was a little bit of, he was a little bit dim. It's kind of an English sounding word.
Sure.
He was dim. And VandeR, he's basically just the intelligent guy.
The thinker, cerebral guy.
Yeah, no, he's a really good teammate. And, I still think, nowadays, he's not the prodigy anymore, because there was a time where he was, said to be one of the best. Right now, I think that it's really good, to have him as the experienced guy in your team and, put a lot of firepower around him.
Yes.